You look at life as one examining a battlefield, trying to guess where the next attack or the next blessing will come from. But listen to me seriously. Nothing you fear or desire began outside of you. The world you see is merely the stage where your consciousness projects what it has already accepted as true. And yet, most live as though searching for crumbs, waiting for reality to change first before they believe. This is the fundamental error. It is the root of all human frustration. You have been conditioned to react to the world, not to create it, to await signs instead of emitting them, to interpret circumstances instead of commanding them, and this inversion causes many to spend their lives trapped in cycles they believe are destiny, when in fact they are just reflections of unquestioned inner states. There are those who look at their own lives and say, "But I am fighting, I am striving, I am doing everything right." And I say, effort without identity is like pushing a door that only opens by pulling. You can try 1,000 paths. You can ask, you can cry out, you can despair. But as long as the inner state remains the same, nothing changes. Reality is faithful to what you are, not to what you insist on trying to achieve. And this is the truth that so many avoid, because accepting it requires abandoning the comfortable illusion that the problem lies in the world. It requires spiritual maturity. It requires courage. You may think you are moving toward what you desire, but most of the time you are merely orbiting the same inner state, circling within yourself while believing you are advancing. Life then seems repetitive, unfair, slow. You convince yourself that something external is blocking your path, when in reality the only possible blockage is the state you continue to maintain out of emotional habit. I tell you now, you are not at the mercy of anything external. True change does not begin when the door opens. It begins when you decide you have already entered. When you become the fulfilled end within yourself. When you stop negotiating with appearances and assume, with tranquility and authority, that what you desire already belongs to your being. Sustained imagination is not fantasy. It is pure creation. It is the law operating in silence. And if you understood the depth of this, you would never again waste time chasing effects. You would go straight to the cause, the inner state. This is the introduction to the truth that many fear, but which liberates everyone who accepts it. Reality does not precede the state. It obeys it. You do not react to the world. The world reacts to you. And when you awaken to this consciousness, everything changes, because everything has always been waiting for only one thing, your inner decision. The first step is to understand, with the honesty that few have the courage to face, that you never manifest what you desire, you manifest what you are. And this sentence, despite its simplicity, carries a profound incision. It separates the emotional seeker of what they desire from the silent creator who assumes the state and lives from it. As long as you look at your desire as something distant, something to be achieved, something that requires proof, signs, or permissions, you will be confessing to the universe and to yourself that you are not the person who possesses it. And the law, which responds solely to the state, not to the request, will reproduce precisely that incomplete identity. Therefore, before any technique, before any visualization, before any affirmation, there is a more serious inner work, abandoning the old identity. And do not think that this means improving it, adjusting it, or embellishing it with positive thoughts. The old identity must die. It cannot walk with you into the new reality because it was built by beliefs, fears, impressions, and sensations that precisely sustained the life you are trying to overcome. You do not put new clothes over open wounds. First, you remove what is rotten. Similarly, you do not become the version that manifests wealth by continuing to feel poor, scarce, anxious, and unworthy. The external world only changes when you decide that this old feeling no longer has the right to exist within you. The truth is that almost everyone says they want something, but they feel like someone who doesn't have it. And it is this feeling that the law responds to. The state is always the creator, always. If you desire prosperity but feel fear of the future, it is fear that shapes your experience, not desire. If you desire love but perceive yourself as small, rejected, or invisible, it is that feeling that creates your reality, not desire. Manifestation occurs through emotional identity, not through a list of requests. And here lies the discipline. You need to become the fulfilled end before any external change. This means deliberately choosing a new inner posture, even if everything around contradicts that choice. It means allowing yourself to legitimately feel the reality you claim to possess. And it doesn't matter if this seems bold. It is precisely this boldness that makes you cross the invisible boundary between one who asks and one who assumes. You do not manifest a house by desiring a house. You manifest it by assuming the consciousness of one who already lives in it. You do not manifest abundance by asking for abundance. You manifest it by wearing the natural feeling of one who lives with it. Abandoning the old identity is a silent, internal, definitive act. It is telling yourself, I no longer nourish this version of myself, and remaining firm in that. Because external reality only bows down when you decide internally that you are no longer the person who suffered, who waited, who doubted. You become the new, and then everything around is compelled to follow you. When you understand that change begins in the inner state, you realize that merely desiring is not enough. You must assume and live as if it were now. This is the point that separates dreamers from creators. It is not about pretense or self-deception. It is about consciously inhabiting the final reality before it becomes visible. Most believe they can only feel something after they see the result. But this dependence on the senses is precisely what keeps them trapped in the same life. The law works in the opposite direction. You feel first, and the world materializes afterward. Assuming the state is an emotional discipline, not a fantasy. It is allowing the feeling of the fulfilled desire to become more real internally than external circumstances, even when these seem to scream the opposite. It is acting in the invisible with the same firmness with which others try to act in the visible. You close your eyes, enter the realized end, and treat it as a fact, not a possibility. It is not a future hope, it is a present conclusion. And the world, obedient to the law, begins to adjust, often in ways you would not be able to anticipate with your limited logic. You must understand that assuming the state does not mean changing external behaviors immediately. It is not about forcing attitudes, but about altering the inner vibration of consciousness. When you truly assume something is already yours, your posture naturally changes. Your breath, your gaze, your thoughts, your movements, everything begins to reflect this new inner position. You begin to walk like someone who already has, not like someone who is still searching. And it is precisely this subtle yet profound change that reorganizes the world around you. The strength of as if it were now lies in ignoring the protests of reason and the evidence of the senses, because the senses only show the past, never the future. They display the reflection of the old state, not the seed of the new. If you live reacting to what you see, you will be condemned to repeat what you have already lived. But if you maintain the feeling of the realized end, then it is the world that will have to react to you. Assuming the state is, therefore, an act of spiritual sovereignty. It is looking at visible reality without bowing to it. It is saying internally, my truth does not depend on what I see. What I see depends on my truth. When you maintain this posture, even for a few moments a day, you open doors that no physical action could open. You begin to notice coincidences, movements, encounters, and solutions that did not come from effort, but from inner alignment. And the more naturally you assume the state, the more inevitable the manifestation becomes. Because the end, once felt as present, cannot fail to reveal itself externally. When you begin to live the desired state as an inner reality, the most common temptation arises for those who have not yet understood the law. To look at the clock. To ask when everything will happen, how much time is left, why it hasn't appeared yet, why nothing has changed. But this preoccupation with time is the poison that corrodes manifestation at its root. Time, for the creative consciousness, has no power whatsoever. It is merely the means by which the invisible translates into form, but it is never the cause, nor the indicator of what is to come. Whoever lives asking when reveals that they have not yet truly assumed the realized end. One who truly assumes the state does not wait. They merely observe the inevitable unfolding of what is already true within them. They are not concerned with dates, because they understand that time is simply reality's tool to organize what has already been decreed internally. When you worry about delay, you are not perceiving an external absence, you are revealing an internal absence. Restlessness is the symptom of doubt, and doubt is the old state trying to regain control. Therefore, every time you look at circumstances and think about time, you will be undoing the work you began. The law operates outside the temporal logic you have learned to obey. The world's time is linear. The time of imagination is instantaneous. In consciousness, the end is already established. In the world, it merely reveals itself at the pace necessary for each piece to fit effortlessly. It is like planting a seed. You do not dig up the earth every day to see if it is growing. If you did that, you would kill the process. The seed grows because you planted it, not because you watch over it. Manifestation works the same way. You plant a state, and the state works for you. Your only function is not to pull it out of the soil with doubts. When someone says it's taking too long, I respond, too long compared to what? The consciousness that assumes does not measure, does not compare, does not question. It knows. It rests in what has already been created internally. The feeling of the realized end is your guarantee. Anxious waiting is merely the old mind trying to survive, and when you listen to it, you return to the previous state, and the world returns exactly that to you. Free yourself from the tyranny of time. It is not your judge nor your enemy. It is merely the messenger of what you have declared true within yourself. When you abandon the obsession with when, you finally allow the inevitable to happen. And it is always inevitable. Because once the state is established, manifestation is not a possibility. It is a certainty awaiting your silent permission to appear. When you abandon the tyranny of time and firm yourself in the assumed state, another inevitable test arises: the battle for your attention. Attention is the most sacred force of consciousness, because it feeds everything it touches. What you keep alive within you grows, and what you abandon dies. Therefore, this is one of the most decisive aspects of the process, protecting your attention as one protects a treasure. You cannot serve two masters. Either you sustain the new state, or you sustain the old. There is no middle ground. Every thought you accept, every emotion you feed, every image you mentally revive, all of this reinforces one of two identities: the one you want to leave behind, or the one you wish to assume. Most people do not manifest what they want because they live reacting to the appearance of circumstances. They wake up strengthening the desired state in the morning, and at the slightest sign of external contradiction, return to the old state. They do not realize that in doing so, they are offering their attention as a sacrifice to their own limitations. The external world has not yet changed because it can only reflect what you continuously sustain within yourself. If you alternate between faith and doubt, hope and fear, certainty and discouragement, the reflection will be equally unstable. Manifestation requires constancy, not perfection. And constancy is measured by the continuity of attention, not by the absence of distractions. When you realize your attention has been drawn by fear, conflict, or doubt, do not blame yourself. Simply return. Return to the desired state silently, naturally, without drama. You lose nothing by being distracted. You lose only when you remain distracted. Attention is the bridge that unites the invisible with the visible. It is the thread that keeps the state alive and active within you. As long as your attention is fixed on the old state, it is that state that will continue to create. When you consciously decide to withdraw it and give it to the desired state, what happens externally matters little. The invisible has already begun to move in your direction. Therefore, do not waste your attention on narratives that contradict what you have decided to be. Do not emotionally engage with problems. Do not discuss limitations. Do not repeat stories of lack. All of this is nourishment for an identity you are trying to abandon. Attention is the altar where you offer your devotion, and what you adore, consciously or unconsciously, becomes your reality. Protect your attention firmly. Treat it as something sacred. When the external world tries to rip it from you with noise, crisis, or chaos, remember, chaos has no power over one who has already decided their state. You silently sustain the new, and the world, sooner or later, will have to bow to what you have chosen to keep alive within yourself. When you finally understand the power of attention and begin to sustain it in the desired state, something extraordinary happens. The world tries to tempt you with signs. Small external movements begin to appear, coincidences, subtle changes, unexpected gestures. And this is where many stumble because they start to depend on these signs to believe. They become evidence hunters, as if the universe needed to prove something. But I say, this is walking in the opposite direction of the law. You were not called to follow signs. You were called to become the sign yourself. Manifestation does not arise from external clues. External clues arise from inner certainty. The world only moves because you first moved within yourself. Whoever seeks signs declares without realizing it that they still doubt. And doubt is always the old state trying to survive. It is the echo of an identity that should have already been abandoned. When you assume the state with firmness, you do not need confirmation. You become the confirmation. The silent certainty you carry is so absolute that external events cease to determine your feeling. They become merely natural consequences, nothing more. And that is why so many remain trapped in emotional fluctuation, because they expect the world to say yes before they allow themselves to believe. But one who understands the law knows that it is belief that compels the world to say yes. and not the other way around. Scripture says, "Believe that you have already received." It does not say to seek proof nor to analyze circumstances. It says to assume it as accomplished. One who has understood this instruction does not observe the world to know if something is coming. They observe only to see how what is already theirs will unfold. The difference is profound. One observes out of fear. The other observes out of curiosity. One seeks validation. The other is already validated. One needs clues. The other is the clue itself. Therefore, do not be deceived by signs. They mean nothing by themselves. They are merely the delayed reflection of what you have decreed in consciousness. If a sign appears, great, but if it does not appear, nothing changes in your inner state. External silence is as valuable as movement, because manifestation is not in the waves you see, but in the invisible current that has already been established by your conviction. When you maintain this posture, when you remain firm without demanding proof, you reach a level of inner authority that cannot be shaken by anything the senses present. Become the sign. Act internally as one who has already received. Feel as one who already lives. Think as one who already is. When you become the proof, the world merely confirms what you had already decreed in the invisible. And at that point, nothing external has the power to delay what is already established within you. When you integrate all these principles, abandoning the old identity, assuming the state as now, freeing yourself from time, protecting your attention, and becoming the sign yourself, you reach the most decisive point of all, that of finally commanding, in absolute silence, that reality obey what you have chosen to be. And this is the place almost no one reaches, because it requires a courage born not of physical strength, but of inner authority. Most continue to ask, to wait, to react, but one who has understood the law does not ask, they determine. They do not beg, they kan assumpta. They do not wait to see in order to believe, they kan believe, and therefore see. At this stage, you realize that the world never had a will of its own. It has always responded to the state you sustained with the most emotional intensity. And then you understand why so many live in endless cycles, because they continue to sustain the same identity, the same fears, the same narratives, and then are surprised to see life repeating patterns. But repetition is not punishment, it is merely obedience. The world only knows how to mirror what you are internally. Nothing more, nothing less. It cannot do otherwise. And now I tell you something that few accept, because it destroys the illusion they have nurtured for years. You are not waiting for manifestation. Manifestation is waiting for you. Waiting for you to decide, not to desire. Waiting for you to assume, not to observe. Waiting for you to feel it as real, not to hope for it to happen. Life is always ready to reorganize itself, but it only moves when you move internally. As long as you vibrate as one who lacks, the world will echo lack. As long as you perceive yourself as small, the world will reflect closed doors. But when you position yourself silently and irrevocably as someone who already is be, the entire universe begins to gather around that decision. And this is the point where you finally abandon the childish habit of begging for external changes. You stop being a beggar of circumstances. You stop watching for signs. You stop treating manifestation as something fragile, improbable, or distant. You become the conscious creator, one who commands not with words but with state. And the command of a sustained state is more powerful than any prayer filled with despair. From this moment on, you walk through the world with a tranquility that baffles those still conditioned by appearances, because you know that nothing can resist the state you maintain with conviction. You know that everything that happens in the visible is merely a consequence, and you know that by assuming your place as creator, reality not only responds, it bows. So now, silently, make your inner choice. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that you sustain it until the world has no other option but to reflect what you have decided to be, because everything already is, and everything is already within. From everything you have heard, there is only one possible direction: to rise internally. No longer as one who waits, who asks, who observes life as something that happens to them, but as one who has finally understood the ancient, eternal, and unshakable truth: you are the cause, never the effect. Nothing outside of you has any authority whatsoever. Nothing your senses show you can determine who you are. Nothing in the visible world happens without first having been accepted, felt, or imagined within your own consciousness. Now you know that the state you sustain is the sole legislator of your experience, that desires manifest nothing, identities manifest everything. that it is not the distressed prayer that changes reality, but the confident silence of one who has assumed the end. That it is not time that decides when something arrives, but the inner firmness of one who already possesses it. That it is not external signs that validate your faith, but your faith that creates the signs. And that attention, when disciplined, becomes a sword capable of cutting from your life everything that does not belong to your new state. So I tell you with authority, stop, from this moment on, begging the world for what only you can decree within yourself. Abandon the old identity, the one that waited, that doubted, that felt small. Don the new state with naturalness, with tranquility, with the certainty of one who has already received. Walk as one who already has, feel as one who already lives, think as one who already is. And do not allow anything or anyone to drag your attention back to the old version of yourself. Reality is not sovereign before you. It is obedient. It imitates you. It bows. And the more you sustain the inner truth, the more quickly it reorganizes itself to reflect what you have determined. Because the law does not fail. Sustained imagination does not err. And the assumed state, when firm, becomes inevitable in the physical world. Therefore go forth, not as a spiritual beggar, but as an awakened creator. Command in silence, feel with conviction. Live in the realized end, and allow the world like a faithful mirror to simply return to you what you dared to assume within yourself. Everything already is. Everything is already within. Now, you also need to be.